A mysterious flame brightened the night sky for a few seconds in central Russia, leaving residents baffled about its origin. This video was captured on a driver's dash cam. The sky suddenly became red, then turned into a massive bright yellow spot. Now, it blazed for several seconds before going out. So far, scientists have no clear explanation as to what caused the flash. Well, those living in central Russia aren't exactly strangers to apocalypse-style phenomena in the skies. Most of us, of course, will remember this burning object raining down from the sky after a meteorite exploded above the Earth over the Urals in February 2013. Scientists said the blast was 30 times brighter than the sun, with the force of 40 Hiroshima nuclear bombs. But it's not just Russians who've had the chance to witness some spectacular activity above their heads. 5 years ago, scientists all over the world were trying to figure out the origins of this mysterious blue anomaly spiraling in the Norwegian skies. It later turned out it was caused by a failed test of a Russian missile.
The Pentagon is going to spend $7.5 billion to make emergency fixes to its nuclear weapons infrastructure. That, according to an announcement by Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel on Friday. Now, this comes after two separate Pentagon studies found there are systemic problems with manpower shortages, aging infrastructure, and the inspection system for America's nuclear program. To discuss these reports, I was joined earlier by Robert Levinson, senior defense analyst for Bloomberg Government. I started by asking him what prompted the Pentagon to begin this review in the first place.
Well, they've had a few incidents in the nuclear establishment, going back a few years to one where they accidentally moved some nuclear weapons from an Air Force base without knowledge to another Air Force base. And there's been a few incidents of morale problems and some cheating incidents with some nuclear officers. So they felt that there were some real problems in the force, and Secretary Hagel ordered, I think, 2 separate reviews to look at all the problems.
One of the things that was pretty shocking as a revelation in this report is the fact that 3 nuclear bases are sharing a single wrench that's needed to put nuclear warheads on missiles. And at that news conference on Friday, Secretary Hagel described how crews shared the wrench. In fact, I think we have a clip of that. Let's listen.
They did it by Federal expressing the one wrench around to each base. They were creative and innovative, and they made it work. But that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, you would think FedExing a wrench back and forth is not the way to do it. Your thoughts on that?
Well, clearly not. I mean, this is just showing that this force, and I think the Secretary and the reports recognize this force, they've been neglected here, and they're obviously not being funded at the levels that they need to be. Obviously, a situation like that is really intolerable, and hence the request for more money to, fix some of these problems, I think.
When we talk about this, you have to keep in mind that obviously these different crews, 3 different crews, are really maintaining the nation's 450 intercontinental ballistic missiles. How important is it to have regular oversight and to do these reviews before you start to see kind of a trail of problems?
Well, I think that's the whole issue here. I mean, it goes back to, we saw these problems. There used to be part of what was called the Strategic Air Command, which handled all of this stuff, and that was during the Cold War. And one of the things with guys who were in what we used to call SAC was, there was really very little tolerance for error, very strict standards, very strict inspections. When the Cold War ended and the nuclear mission sort of went down the priority list, a lot of things started to slip through the cracks.
Yeah, it almost seems unbelievable to people, though, don't you think, that the idea that this nuclear superpower in such a short time would kind of dismiss the nuclear weapons and the capability and the storing of those weapons? It just feels like either do something with them, either get rid of them or destroy them or, get rid of them somehow, or really take extra care with them. And as you talked about, when you have incidents, for instance, where nuclear weapons are being transported really from one Air Force base to another without people knowing, how does that happen?
Well, like I say, I think, once the Cold War went away and the idea that these weapons were very unlikely to be used and the career mobility of people who were involved in this program, which, these folks used to be at the top of the food chain in the Air Force and things like that, and that all started to deteriorate, and this sort of neglect just started to creep in, and then you saw these problems, sort of manifest themselves in these high-profile incidents. And I think, there's huge concern. There's concern on Capitol Hill. Obviously, the Secretary, the nation trust the Air Force and the Navy to a certain extent to maintain this arsenal, and they get very worried about it. And I think, the Secretary wanting more money for this, he's probably not going to have a whole lot of problems getting that money from Congress to fix this.
Let's talk about the morale issue, because you're kind of touching on that right now. At one point in the hierarchy of U.S. military, the guys associated with nuclear weapons, as you said, they're the top of the food chain. Over time, they've kind of disappeared in terms of that prominence. What has this report found in terms of the morale issues? Is there a suffering of low morale here?
Yeah, I think the reports, I didn't read all the details, but I think there's been consistent reports of problems in morale, really career progression, again, that these guys in these career fields aren't getting promoted at the rates of their colleagues in, say, other career fields and things like that. And also the inspections, there's sort of been, since some of these incidents, so many inspections, they feel like they're working just from one inspection to the other, and they have trouble, sort of focusing on the mission day to day. It's a real problem in the force, I think.
You're talking about going to Congress and getting this money. You don't think it'll be very difficult. At the same time, as we're seeing kind of the buildup once again in terms of defense spending right now, $7.5 billion is not a small sum of money to go and request from Congress. Where does that money come from, and how do they get it?
Well, that is a real challenge because, defense spending right now is capped according to the Budget Control Act, which passed in 2011. So this will have to come at the expense of something else, either something else in defense, some other priorities, or they'll have to get the money from some domestic spending, entitlement spending, raise taxes, or just increase the deficit. It's got to come from somewhere, and Secretary Hagel wasn't clear on where that money might come from, but you can't get blood from a stone. It's going to have to come from somewhere.
Well, and to that point, when we talk again about defense spending being capped, and at the same time you had defense contractors who were kind of ramping up production for new weapons and new materials. I think we talked about this the last time you were here. You think it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to convince Congress to say, let's take money away from those programs and move it into nuclear weapons that, again, feel antiquated even to the American public. How do you sell that?
Well, I think there's not too many congressmen who want to oppose more money to fix the nuclear weapons establishment. I think it's going to be very hard for a congressman. You're right. It's going to have to trade it off against other priorities, and obviously every congressman has interest in certain programs and things like that. But I think, in terms of the argument, I think everybody's going to buy the argument. It will be a question of where do you get the money from. But I think most people recognize that the nuclear establishment is very important. And if the Secretary of Defense is saying we need more money to fix problems, this is not to expand the arsenal or to buy new weapons. This is to fix problems in the existing force. And I think Congress is going to be sympathetic.
Robert Levinson, Senior Defense Analyst at Bloomberg Government, as always, thanks for your insight.
Thanks.
Since we broke the story about the discovery of radioactive contamination out of Seattle Park, we have heard from a number of concerned visitors and neighbors.
Well, tonight we'll hear from a Navy veteran who spent a whole year in the building at the center of the Magnuson Park cleanup. Environmental specialist Gary Chittum has the story. It's new at 6:30.
But most of my activities and stuff were in the middle of the middle of the shed upstairs, and then on the other side of the building would have been where the wood shop was located at.
It seems like it was just yesterday to Steve Rex, a Navy veteran who was awarded the Gold Star for his service as a builder in Building 27 at Naval Station, Seattle. In 2009, Seattle City Parks workers discovered evidence of radiation contamination in the shed attached to Building 27, and the Navy confirmed it. But nobody warned the public about it for 3 years, and when it did, Navy experts said people who spent even a few hours near the building once in a while were not in any danger.
I was in there every day, all day long. All day long.
50 years before Rex spent his days doing paperwork and carpentry in the shed, it was used to apply radium paint to make instruments in naval aircraft glow in the dark. The Navy is currently cleaning up remnants of that radioactive paint that contaminated the shed and sewer pipes leading out of it.
Inside the hangar,
Rex understands nobody knew the dangers when he worked there in the 90s, but wonders why he was never notified when it was discovered.
I think that they would have had plenty of time to do some research, at least to contact some of the Navy personnel that were stationed here every day in the building facility.
We asked the Navy that question and got this response. The Navy uses appropriate media venues to inform the public when looking to communicate with former active duty and civilian employees who worked in an area of concern. The Navy has advertised in the Seattle Times and the Navy Times for this purpose.
Plywood it off on the
Rex understands that and doesn't want anything from the Navy, but still, he would have appreciated a personal heads up instead of seeing it on TV. In Seattle, Gary Chittum, King 5 News.
The Navy advises any former active duty members who have health concerns to contact their local Department of Veterans Affairs.